Hello, planning commissioners, can you hear me? No, they cannot. I'm only on the speaker.
Everything's on mute.
For special. We come in early, we try to get it started out.
That's all right.
They should be able to hear you.
Commissioners, can you hear me? Would someone else like to speak? Maybe it's just me, I'm cursed.
Can you hear us? Commissioners?
Everything's on and right. Everything's coming through.
Do you think that there's one of the computers has somehow got something not right?
You guys sending in chat?
I just sent the
Yeah, we're
chat.
just checking. Should the settings on our computer impact?
You shouldn't.
Yeah,
No,
I wouldn't think so.
Coming through the microphones, and I've got everything unmuted.
But the meeting hasn't actually started yet, right?
No,
Okay.
Don't.
Does that need to,
that wouldn't happen.
that doesn't happen?
I don't know what I'm seeing. The chat is gonna.
I just wanted them to know that we're
Working
trying
on
to
it.
fix an audio issue, that's all. I
Oh,
just
yeah.
wanted them to know, because they,
Yeah, I didn't know if Josh was expecting us to ask something or,
Oh.
I wasn't clear.
Yeah. Okay.
But I don't know what we would ask them.
Okay, try it now.
Planning commissioners, can you hear us? Yes,
Excellent.
okay, would someone please say hello so we can know if we can hear you?
Hello.
Oh, okay, now we're nice
Hello.
and loud. Okay, fantastic, thank you.
Yes.
Yes.
We cannot see you, by the way.
You can't see us though.
He's gonna stay, yeah,
Got it.
momentarily.
Okay. There we go.
Okay, Chair Freeman, are you ready to start the meeting?
I am.
Okay, great.
Good evening. I'd like to call the meeting to order and welcome you to the regular meeting of the Milwaukie Planning Commission. Agendas and additional copies of staff reports are available on the city website at www.milwaukeeoregon.gov. You can locate them by navigating to the community calendar where tonight's meeting page is posted. If you have not reviewed the agenda, please do so. It contains important information about the process. Native Lands Acknowledgement. The City of Milwaukie respectfully acknowledges that our community is located on the ancestral homeland of the Clackamas people. In 1855, the surviving members of the Clackamas signed the Willamette Valley Treaty, also known as the Kaipuya Treaty, with federal government in good faith. We offer our respect with gratitude to the indigenous people of this land. Item number 2, minutes. Moving on to approval of the August 22nd, 2023 and September 26, 2023 meeting minutes. Does anyone have any corrections to make? Okay, seeing no corrections, I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
I motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Second?
I'll second.
Okay. I have a motion and seconded. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed
Aye.
say aye. Aye.
Aye.
I believe that was everyone, but just in case, all those opposed say nay. Hearing no nays, the motion is approved as presented. Item number 3, informational items. Are there any informational items from staff?
I just wanted to mention that I hope everybody takes a look at the city's calendar. This is a really active time in Milwaukie this time of year. We've got a lot of stuff going on, so the big ships are coming in. There's an opportunity to see the big ships down on the waterfront. We've got the umbrella parade coming up. We've got solstice. There might be something on New Year's Eve. So I just encourage you all to keep up with take a look at the community calendar, because there's a lot of really good stuff coming up here in the next month or so. That's all I've got.
Great. Item number 4, audience participation. This is an opportunity to comment on items not on tonight's agenda. Does any audience member wish to comment on any item that is not on tonight's commission agenda?
There are no audience members in participation.
Okay. And there's no one on the telephone as well?
There is not.
Okay, great. Let's see. I think we can move on to 5.0, the Community Involvement Advisory Committee. At this point of the agenda, the commission will act as the Community Involvement Advisory Committee. Does staff have any updates to provide?
I do not have any updates at this time.
Okay. Do any of the members of the CIAC have any updates to provide?
No.
Seeing no updates. Let's see. Okay, I think that concludes that section. Item number 6, hearing items. Let's see. Yeah. The next agenda item is a public hearing to consider application number CSU 2023-005. Purpose of the application is to request approval of a major modification of the community service use for Sunshine Early Learning Childcare Center on property located at 2816 and 2835 Southeast Harrison Street. The public hearing is called to order. The applicant has the burden of proving that the application is consistent with the city's zoning, subdivision ordinance, comprehensive plan, and applicable municipal code provisions, and that the proposal conforms with the city's applicable criteria. I now ask that the staff cite the zoning ordinance sections where the criteria can be found.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. The applicable sections can be found in MMC section 19302, MMC subsection 19502.1, MMC subsection 19504.7, MMC chapter 19600, MMC chapter 19700, MMC section 19904, and finally MMC section 19006.
Thank you. All testimony and evidence must be directed toward the applicable substantive criteria. Failure to address the criterion or raise an issue with sufficient detail to allow Planning Commission an adequate opportunity to respond to each issue precludes appeal to the City Council based on that issue. Failure to raise constitutional or other issues related to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient detail to allow a response precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Any party with standing may appeal the decision of the Planning Commission to the City Council. Persons with standings are those who submit comments or testify. If additional documents or evidence are provided by any party, the Commission may, if requested, allow a continuance or leave the record open to allow the parties a reasonable opportunity to respond. Any such continuance or extension shall be subject to the limitations of the 120-day rule unless a continuance or extension is requested or agreed to by the applicant. Conflicts of interest. Does any member of the commission wish to abstain from this hearing? Seeing none.
No.
Does any member of the commission wish to declare an actual or potential conflict of interest?
No. No.
Seeing no. Does any member of the commission wish to report on any ex-parte contacts?
No.
No. Will any commissioner who have visited the site prior to this hearing please raise their hand? Okay. Did any commissioner who visited the site speak to anyone at the site or know anything different from what is indicated in the staff report for this application?
No.
All right. I think you said there's no audience members, so I guess we don't need to state the challenge provision. Let's see. Let's proceed to the staff report.
Thank you, Chair. One moment while we load the presentation here. Okay. Thanks. So, as mentioned, this is a major modification to an existing community service use to operate a child care center at 2816 and 2835 Southeast Harrison Street. The applicant is the Sunshine Early Learning Child Care Center, and the file number is CSU 2023-005. So the subject site is comprised of two properties, as mentioned, 2816, which is on the south side of Harrison, and 2835, which is on the north side of Harrison. The south property is developed with a sanctuary and also a office and classroom building. That property also has a outdoor play area and off-street parking lot. The property to the north is developed with a single detached dwelling along with a parking lot that serves the church facility to the south. In terms of land use history, 2816 Southeast Harrison was originally approved to operate the daycare operation in 1991. That approval was modified then in 2007 and is the subject of tonight's hearing. There have been a few additional land use cases for the property. There was for example, but they're unrelated to this specific request, but there was a office space. The church requested through a conditional use process to convert some vacant office space into offices that they could rent to professionals. There was a minor modification to add a monument sign in 2008. And then in 2002, there was a community service use application to operate a high school aged youth programming. And then there's no land use applications for the property to the north. Thank you. So in terms of the vicinity and surrounding zoning, all properties, the subject properties and surrounding properties are all zoned residential high density. So again, this application is a request to modify the land use decision from 1991 that approved the childcare operation. Minor modification was approved in 2007 to this use, which capped the student capacity at 45. Many of the original conditions from 1991 were carried over in the 2007 condition. This application is being reviewed as a major modification as opposed to a minor modification for two principal reasons. To qualify as a minor modification, the proposal must not increase the intensity of use, and it must not contravene any previous conditions placed on the approval by the Planning Commission. The applicant, in this case, is requesting to raise the number of students that are permitted from what is currently 45 under the original approval or as modified in 2007 to 144. This both would contravene a previous condition of approval and increases the intensity of use on the site. So to accommodate the additional students, the applicant is requesting and is required to, under our code, to add an additional outdoor play area. The applicant is proposing to add this area at 2835 Southeast Harrison. This is the rear portion of the property to the north here, shown on the screen. The applicant has also proposed to add a walkway, which is also required by the code, to connect the children's play area to the public sidewalk. The applicant is also proposing to improve the off-street parking area, which is non-conforming in various respects, by repaving and restriping the lot. Before moving on to the approval criteria for the proposal, I just want to outline some important context. This was all discussed in the staff report, but wanted to mention it here as well. For the parking improvements, our code requires that parking improvements be proportionate to the proposed impact of the proposal. So required improvements, cost of materials are not allowed to exceed 10% of the development permit value. Public facility improvements, the city engineer, as discussed in the staff report, has determined that the proposal would not increase trips to the site, or would increase trips to the site, but that public facility improvements would not be warranted to mitigate that impact. And we have one of our engineering technicians, Jennifer Bacchus, is here to answer if you have any questions about that specifically. In terms of impacts, staff identified 2 potential impacts, increased noise and increased traffic, but believe that the city's noise ordinance, along with existing conditions limiting the hours of operation and screening requirements for the children's play area, along with existing vegetated buffers, provide adequate mitigation to the noise. And we've discussed, or as mentioned, our city engineer has determined that transportation facility improvements would not be warranted. And then finally, additional requirements. Commissioners should be aware that in addition to this land use approval, the applicant is required to be certified by the state of Oregon to operate a child care facility, and is also required to obtain a building permit from the city of Milwaukie. So looking more specifically at the approval criteria, there are sort of 2 sets of approval criteria here. There are the general community service use approval criteria, and then in addition to that, specific approval criteria that apply to any school or childcare center. So starting with the general community service use approval criteria, the proposal is required to follow the base zone standards and the standards for off-street parking. The applicant isn't proposing any development beyond the addition of the children's play area and the improvements to the off-street parking area, which is currently, as mentioned, non-conforming, but is moving closer to conformance with what the code requires. So staff found that approval criteria to be met. Specific standards for the proposed uses is found in the listed subsections. Those are the specific school-based and childcare approval criteria, which we'll talk about in the next 2 slides. The third approval criteria is related to the hours and levels of operation being reasonably compatible with surrounding uses, which are predominantly residential and commercial in this area. There was no request through the application, and staff are not recommending that the previously approved hours of operation in 1991 be modified. Those are 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. The fourth approval criteria, that the public benefits of the proposed use are greater than any negative impacts to surrounding uses. Again, staff have identified noise and traffic as potential impacts, but believe that conditions and existing city standards will mitigate those impacts. And the applicant has made the case that childcare is a needed service in Milwaukie, and that this proposal expands the number of students that would be able to access childcare in the community. And so that's the benefit. And then finally, that the location is appropriate for the type of use proposed. The applicant has made the case that, this is an underutilized property. There's existing classroom space, outdoor area, and adequate parking to serve the proposal. So staff found that standards to be met as well. Looking now at the specific school and childcare approval criteria, I believe there are 9 of those. So the first is related to outdoor play area. Our code requires and the state requires that there's a certain number of square feet per child served for schools and childcare operations. The applicants are allowed to reduce that by half if they are proposing to stagger the use of that play area. So in this case, the applicant has requested to reduce that by half, and staff have found that standard to be met. The second approved criteria is ensuring that there's adequate pedestrian facilities both on and off site to serve the facility. There are curb and sidewalk along Harrison Street in this area. Those facilities do not perfectly conform to city standards, but as mentioned previously, the city engineer didn't find that improvements there would be warranted based on the impact. In terms of on-site facilities, the property to the south at 2816 has pedestrian pathways to all entrances, and then for the property to the north, the applicant has proposed to add a walkway. Staff have also recommended conditioning that the walkway comply with the city standards for on-site walkways, which the site plan doesn't clearly show all of those details. So that's why that condition has been recommended. Looking at number 3, it basically is a requirement that the outdoor play area be screened with a site obscuring fence. The applicant has proposed adding a fence around the new play area for the property at 2835, and then 2816 already has a site obscuring fence. So conditions have been proposed to ensure that that's maintained, and that the site plan again does not clearly indicate that all residential properties would be screened, and so a condition has been proposed to ensure that as well. Number 4, that public facilities are adequately serving the facility. Again, there's an existing curb and sidewalk, so staff believe that public facilities are adequate to serve this proposal. Looking at number 5, that the site has adequate safe loading, ingress and egress. There is a condition of approval from the 91 community service use application, and that was carried over to the 2007 minor modification, that loading and unloading occur on the property to the south, the church facility, and that it be one-way traffic. That is currently in existence, and as I understand it, has been working well. It does appear that the way that it was installed is actually the opposite direction from what was listed in the 1991 approval. So staff have just recommended modifying that condition so that it reflects reality. In addition, the applicant has mentioned that there's the improvements to the off-street parking area across the street at 2835 will serve as an additional location for parents to pick up and drop off kids. Looking at number 6, off-street parking, as mentioned in the staff report, this is limited by the climate-friendly equitable communities in terms of requiring a minimum number of off-street parking spaces. Staff analyzed the application for the maximum allowed number of parking spaces, and the proposal appears to comply there as well. When a condition has been added recommended to require that the applicant, when submitting for development permits, provide a 2-scale site plan showing compliance with the other various standards in 19600 that do still apply. because CIAC limits our ability to regulate off-street minimum parking, but the other standards in that chapter still do apply when parking is proposed. Looking at number 7, minimum setbacks. This applies to new structural development, primary structures, so new schools or daycare centers. That's not being proposed here. Again, outside of the outdoor play area, there's no new development proposed. Number 8, that bicycle facilities are required to adequately serve the facility. A condition has been recommended requiring that the applicant either demonstrate compliance showing 4 bicycle parking spaces or add 4 bicycle parking spaces in compliance with the standards in section 19609. And then finally, that 50% of the total site is landscaped. While it does not appear that either site, either property currently meets this standard, the applicant is proposing a new landscaping buffer between the off-street parking area and the new on-site walkway at 2835, the north property, connecting that public sidewalk to the children's play area. That landscaping does count towards the overall 15% site requirement, so they are moving towards compliance there. So the referral was sent out to staff and partner agencies on October 5th. We did not receive any comments, although I will say that the Milwaukie Building Division and Clackamas County Fire District Number 1 are working together with the applicant to ensure that the building meets life safety requirements. And again, they will be required to obtain a building permit from Milwaukie Building, demonstrating that compliance, confirming it. And then a notice was sent out for public comments on October 20th. And staff today did not receive any comments about the proposal. I won't go through all of the conditions because I've mentioned many of them in talking about the approval criteria, but I guess I'll just pause and ask if any commissioners have any questions about the recommended conditions. Not seeing any. Okay, moving on. Decision options are, as usual, you have the option to approve the application with the recommended findings and conditions of approval. You can approve the application with additional modifications to the findings and conditions of approval, which would need to be read into the record here. You could continue the hearing or you can deny the application. And just to note that the 120-day deadline for us to make a decision is the city to make a decision is January 31st of next year. Our recommendation is to approve the modification to the CSU and adopt the recommended findings and conditions of approval. This would have the effect of modifying the land use approval to increase the maximum capacity of the child care center to 144 from 45 and permit the child care use to expand across the street to the north property, 2835 Southeast Harrison Street. And just wanted to mention again that as per recommended condition 1, the child care center would still need to obtain a fire and life safety permit to operate at this adjusted capacity. So this is the 144 number is for land use purposes only. That number could change. It can go higher than 144 if you decided to approve the application, but it could be lower if the Clackamas County Fire District and the building division found that it was inappropriate to approve the capacity at 144. So I just wanted to make that crystal clear.
I can ask a clarifying question?
Yes.
You said it could go above 100?
It could not. It could
Oh,
not.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I thought you said
Yeah,
it could.
sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's it. Any questions? Happy to answer.
So it doesn't sound like there's any clarifying questions for staff. Let's see, and I just want to confirm, have we received any other correspondence in this matter that wasn't included in the meeting packet?
We've not.
Okay. Is the applicant there?
The applicant is on Zoom, yes.
Okay. Will the applicant or the representative like to comment?
Yes. I think, Jennifer, I think you are unmuted.
Am I unmuted? Am I muted or unmuted?
You're unmuted.
We can hear you.
Good. Yay. Hello, I'm Jennifer Vogelsong. I'm the owner of Sunshine Early Learning Centers in Milwaukie. And this is a really great building and space that can be used for our community. The new spaces are for our preschool program funded by the state of Oregon. We have many spots. We have 60 spots for preschoolers that is free for the community, and this program would really help the families and community. Another concern that had been, the only thing that ever had been brought to my attention is the crosswalk. And we have crossing guards during the major pickup and drop-off times. We also already have a pre-existing crosswalk that is there marked by the city or ODOT, whoever did the pre-existing marking, but we will have a crossing guard with crossing guard vest and stop sign, just like a public school, during major pickup and drop off, as well as when we're crossing the street for students when we are going to the playground. I just wanted to add that in because it wasn't on the initial, and the only thing that had been brought up on my end of concern. Other than that, everyone is super excited. My family's like, do we need to all be here? And I was like, I think we're okay. But if that is the case, we can rally. But if you have any questions, please let me know. But we really hope that you approve this and that we can move forward for our families.
Great, thank you. Do any of the commissioners have any questions for the applicant? Doesn't appear to be. And staff, I just want to confirm there's no public members present to provide testimony.
That's correct.
Okay. Going through my list here, let's see. Okay, I think we can close the public testimony. Let's see. The public testimony portion of the hearing to request public testimony portion of the hearing on the request regarding the major modification for Sunshine Early Learning Childcare Center, file CSU 2023-005, is now closed. Is the commission ready for discussion?
Yes.
Good. Let's see. Why don't we start with Commissioner Edge, please?
Thank you, Chair. And thank you to staff and also the applicant for their reports and testimony. So really, I've had the opportunity to review the recommended findings and conditions of approval provided by staff, and I think that they accurately reflect the facts in the record. And with the conditions of approval, that all of the standards and criteria can be met. So I'm perfectly satisfied with what's before us right now, and I'd be happy to approve it tonight, as proposed by staff, or as recommended by staff, I should say.
Thank you, Commissioner Edge. Would any other commissioner care to comment?
I would agree with Commissioner Edge. I see no issue with the presentation or the staff report.
Great, thank you. And what about President? Anyone at City Hall? Other?
I'll echo the two comments already.
Yeah, I would as well.
Sounds like we're unanimous.
I would also agree with those comments. If there's no further discussion, I will entertain a motion.
I'll offer a motion. I move that we recommend or that we approve file CSU-2023-005 with the recommended findings and conditions of approval attached in the meeting packet.
I will second that.
Great. I will take a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Looks like we are unanimous. So the motion is approved. Let me see how many. There's 6 of us here. 6-0, I think. Let's see. Application CSU 2023-005 is approved. If anyone wishes to appeal the commission's decision to the city council, you must make application stating the grounds for your appeal within 15 days of the mailing of the notice of decision. Please see planning staff for details. I think that moves us on to item number 7. Do we need to take a break before, or can we just power on? Does anyone need a break? No. All right, I think we'll move on to item number 7, the work session. This work session item is a discussion on Title 17 proposed code amendments. Senior Planner Veracruz will present information about the proposed amendments to the land division code.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you. Back again with code amendments. I think of this package of code amendments as sort of true nerd code, because this is all land division. There really isn't anything super exciting, but it's very necessary. So buckle up. This is going to be an exciting discussion. I will try to make this as interesting as possible, but I appreciate your time in letting me go through what we're proposing in advance of a public hearing in the new year. All right, so let me have a PowerPoint presentation. All right, hopefully this is working. Okay. So Title 17 is our land division code. We have made a few changes to this code over the last few years, but they've been really specific changes to respond to state law. For example, the Senate Bill 458 land amendments that we made as part of the middle housing code package. But we've not made a lot of changes to the code. It's pretty antiquated. It's a little confusing both for staff and for applicants, so we're really trying to make sure that the code is sort of goes through a wholesale revision, making sure that we comply with state law, particularly with the middle housing land division standards, that we have clear and objective standards for land division, that we simplify our review processes and keep things as streamlined as we possibly can. Trying to remove redundant or confusing language, redundant numbering systems. The whole code section is pretty convoluted actually, and we're trying to reorganize it as well for clarity. There's a lot of repetition or pieces of, you end up flipping back and forth through the code if you're actually looking on paper, that make it pretty difficult to use for folks that aren't that familiar with it. So those are the things that we're trying to achieve through this code package. Our process, hoping to have obviously a work session here. We'll have a work session with City Council. We will let the NDAs know what we're doing and then go through our customary code commentary posting with 30-day notice and then go on to our public hearings in the new year. Okay. So the staff report sort of lays out some key sort of headlines of types of changes that we're proposing. The first one is formatting and redundant language. There are a lot of tables of contents in this code. There's a lot of numbering. So we're trying to get rid of all of these, all the different numbers. You might have noticed when I gave you sort of the full, oh, I should back up a little bit. Rather than our typical underlined strikeout version of code, because we're changing so much in this code, we're going to go forward with a proposal to just repeal the whole thing and replace it with all new code, because if we did an underlined strike, it would be really difficult to read because practically every other sentence would have something in it, so it makes it difficult to read. But what I did include in your packet is our existing code, and you might have noticed that, for example, in the definitions section, every single word that's defined has its own section, has its own number in the table of contents. Things like that just make things just overly complicated just visually in trying to work with it. So we're trying to eliminate those needless items and keep have the land division code be formatted similarly to other sections of code, like the zoning code, for example. We reorganized the code sections to provide a completely separate section just for the middle housing land division section. Current code has it interspersed with various other sections of code, and it really needs to live by itself because it is a very specific kind of land division application. And I think it's clearer for applicants, if that's what they are looking to do, that they just look in one section of the code and they don't have to go all over the place trying to figure out what to do. And we're trying to reduce the number of itemized lists of application pieces of things that they need to submit with applications, and rely differently on checklists that we can more easily update as we need to, rather than have to go through code amendments every time that we need to add something else that someone might need to submit as part of their land division application. And certainly feel free to interrupt me as we go, but I'm happy to just keep going and we can answer questions after, whatever makes more sense for you. The second section of, or category of amendments has to do with our review process and application requirements. We've rewritten the sections for each land division type, so they all are sort of on their own, so that it's really clear that if I'm here for a lot line adjustment, I'm here in this one section and I can read what I need to do and then go on from there. Again, the existing code kind of has things in multiple sections, and it's difficult for applicants to figure out what they need to do. So we're trying to make that simpler for applicants. We are removing the type 3 review process for subdivisions. Our existing code requires every subdivision to come through the Planning Commission review process, even if it meets all of the standards for a land division. So we're trying to, as with all of our code, have clear and objective standards, which frankly we already have for land division applications, for subdivisions, which is 4 lots or more. So even if someone meets all of the standards, all the engineering standards for everything, they still have to go through a public hearing process, which is added burden certainly from a process standpoint, but it sort of puts the Planning Commission in somewhat of an awkward situation, because you're going through this whole review process, but it already meets all the standards. So why are we going through this process? It's not discretionary. Certainly if someone needs a variance to one of the standards for a land division, of course they'd be coming to the Planning Commission, but just the act of creating 4 lots doesn't necessarily, doesn't mean that we need to go to the Planning Commission for a type 3 subdivision process. We're also revising some of the language to more clearly identify filing deadlines and language related to extensions. The language that we currently have right now doesn't quite meet the ORS requirements for deadlines, and it makes things very compressed for developers. And it also means that we have deadlines that sometimes a developer or an applicant can't meet because of something that's happening on the county recorders or the county surveyor end of things. Land divisions typically have to be recorded at the county surveyor, but our language is not sort of sympathetic to the fact that the county surveyor sometimes has a delayed process in filing things or recording land divisions, Mylars and that sort of thing. And so it's not the applicant's fault, but our code is pretty strict on some of those standards. So we end up with a lot of extensions or trying to help an applicant through when it's not their fault that the county surveyor isn't able to get to an application more quickly. What we have done, though, certainly to protect the city, is that we won't issue any building permits or any development permits until a subdivision or a partition or what have you is recorded. So it protects the city certainly, but it acknowledges that there are outside parties involved in some of these applications, and we think that our deadlines and extensions and so on ought to recognize that there are other agencies involved in some of these applications. We've added some new language to the code, specifically related to tracts and easements, and also about remainder or leftover land. And I've got some graphics here to explain what we mean by this. But we are coming upon some land division applications that include tracts of land, for example, for stormwater facilities, or certainly easements. And what we're trying to include in our code this go around is have specific requirements and management responsibilities for those tracts and easements. Our code is pretty silent on that. And what this does is helps landowners and property owners within those land divisions down the road who is responsible for maintaining these things. We often come upon folks that might be the second or third owner, within a development, and folks, it was never recorded anywhere who's in charge of any of these things. And so what we would like to do as part of our land division process is to make that very clear, who owns these tracts and easements and who is responsible for them, and what does that management mean. This will help both staff and applicants have very clear language about how those things ought to be handled in the future, and hopefully minimize conflict when the development is complete and homeowners and tenants might change. We're also we're proposing to add some language related to remainder or leftover land, and that's a result of some of our larger properties. We are getting requests from folks that are looking to, for example, on this graphic, you see this very large, long, skinny lot, and that red line that you see just sort of below the arrow is where we've had the property owner is looking to add a property line just to split off the house from the rest of it. But the property owners aren't interested in being the developers. So this isn't kind of a traditional partition where I'm going to partition off my house and then I'm going to develop something on that vacant northern portion. They really just want to sell the rest of it to a developer and let that person take care of whatever they want to do. However, our code does talk about minimum density requirements as part of a land division. But that would require the homeowner to somehow figure out what they're going to do on that northern parcel, and doesn't give them the ability to just split off their house and sell it. What we want to be able to do is allow that to happen, that transaction, but at the same time make sure that the city in the future is protected, and making sure that that northern portion is in fact developed as it should be to meet our minimum density. So what the language, and I looked at some other codes, and actually Gresham has language where they call these, it's actually their leftover code, they call it. But the new language would include requirements that for a partition like this, that would anticipate future development and restricts any permit review on that northern portion until minimum density is achieved. So it would allow this existing homeowner to be able to split off the house, sell this to a developer, but nothing could happen on that northern portion until minimum density is achieved through a development proposal. So, and there's some specific language in there about the kinds of things that we want to make sure that we see on that, but it allows current property owners to be able to do this without tying them up with a big land division proposal that they really don't have any interest in proposing. They want someone else to do it, but it protects the city to make sure that that development does in fact happen. Per our.
Can I ask a question right here with this example on the screen?
Yes.
Thank you. So what's the interplay with the natural resources code here? And are we losing anything by not having a future subdivision? I guess are we missing out on anything with the natural resources code by allowing this new lot to be created that's separate from the parcel where the house is with the natural resources, back to, I think that's a creek back there, right?
It is, and the natural resources affect the southern portion of the house lot. So the natural resources don't actually bleed beyond the house on this particular property.
Right, and so that if this were subdivided, 4 or more lots, with the natural resources would have to go into a tract, right?
Correct. Yes.
And that tract would be under common ownership of like the HOA or whatever?
Well, likely if it stays on the property with the house, that it stays on that house, on that property. So the tract. Even in a subdivision scenario, that included the house. Like if, not a partition scenario, but kind of what we would have required before, which is, you have to do a subdivision. Right, then yes.
On this.
Correct, then yes, the full tract would be, per our natural resources code, would be in a common ownership, or it would be under some sort of larger management entity, generally, yes.
Rather than a single homeowner.
Correct. That's what the natural resources code would require as part of the subdivision, yes.
Yeah, okay. I don't quite know how to ask my next question, but I'm interested in kind of what we might be losing here. By particularly with natural resources, with sites with natural resources on them. I think there's value in making sure that there are natural resources tracts. And so I'm just kind of, since this is, work session, I just want to provide that feedback that it'd be nice to make sure that we're still finding a way to protect, the natural resources. And I guess that whole natural resources code update is maybe more the better venue for having those discussions. But, yeah, I just want to be just want you to, as you're moving forward, to kind of be aware of that interplay. And, I think city policy kind of favors trying to put these tracts into, not just under private single owner, single land, single homeowner, possession, but to try to be more of like a public space.
Right.
Or, even if it's privately held by the HOA, it's still a common ownership. It's not someone's private individual property.
I see what you're saying, and I think, and you're right, the natural resources code update is a good opportunity to look at how we're handling that and how we think we want to handle it in the future. But thank you for raising that point, because I will work with Brett, who's working on the natural resources code, because you're right, this example is a good one to kind of just understand how do these two things go together when there are natural resources involved. So you're right. Thank you for bringing that up. I will make sure that we have that conversation to see if there isn't anything that needs to be taken care of in the Title 17 code so that they talk to one another.
Right. Perfect. Thank you.
No, thank you for that. Appreciate it. Okay. I wanted to raise an issue. So this is sort of the last kind of the items for the code. Even though I've given you like pages and pages of new code, there aren't really a ton of changes, more than what we've already talked about. But this one is something I wanted to identify for the Planning Commission, that this is something that we may at some point need to talk about, or we're trying to figure out how to handle, is development after a middle housing land division occurs. What you see here on the screen is an attached triplex with some new lot lines, because through the middle housing land division, an attached triplex can then become 3 separate. It's still a triplex, but each triplex unit has a fee simple, piece of property underneath that triplex unit. Again, the middle housing land division statute was enacted to provide an opportunity for home ownership that's not necessarily a condominium kind of ownership. In this particular example, there's likely still going to be some easements for that driveway. There's still some common ownership. There's probably still an HOA to deal with some of these commonly held pieces, but each unit itself is a fee simple unit, which can make real estate transactions simpler in some cases. But one of the things that so this is one example, but here's another one. This is an existing triplex actually that is built on 29th Avenue. And if they did come in at some point today or next week and want to, right now it's a condominium, is kind of how it's owned at the moment, but they could come in right now and propose a middle housing land division. And those red lines are pretend new lot lines so that each triplex unit was on its own lot. One of the things that we've talked about in-house and with other communities is what happens when one of those middle housing units wants to build an accessory structure on their property, like a shed or an addition or something like that. The weird thing about the middle housing land division is that even though they are on separate fee simple lots, that's solely for transactional purposes. It's still considered a triplex. So the maximum lot coverage is for the entire triplex. It's not for each unit. So for example, if the maximum lot coverage for this site was 30%, it's 30% over the whole thing. So we've sort of been thinking about, and other communities are thinking about, well, what happens if unit number 1 wants to build a big shed in their backyard and eats up all the lot coverage for the whole triplex? How do we kind of manage that as staff, like reviewing the building permit? What about all the other unit owners? That means nobody else gets a shed, just unit 1 gets a shed. It's one of these complicating things that, and I've talked to the state about it, I've talked to other communities, and no one frankly has a good way of handling it. No one is. We're just sort of waiting to see kind of what happens. One thing that one community has done, which has not been recommended, we do, but they have in their land division code, they have maximum setbacks for each of the middle housing units, so that basically it requires most of the site to be in common ownership with an HOA. So that if anybody wants to build anything, the HOA is involved every time because there isn't anywhere else for you to build something. That has not been recommended to us as something to pursue because the middle housing land division statute is pretty clear about not being able to regulate setbacks on the individual lots. So anyway, it's just something that since we're in the land division code and we've been talking about it, we will likely not be proposing anything to kind of address this particular issue, but we think it's going to be coming. And so staff is going to need to sort of be tracking the lot coverage for these land divisions when they happen, and sort of we will need to figure out a way to make sure that kind of everyone's aware of it or something. We're just honestly not sure, and we're not finding a good solution even with our other sister and brother communities out there to help us. No one's had to wrestle with it quite yet, but it's a possibility. So since we're already talking about land division, I did want to bring it up as something that is a possibility, and its staff is trying to figure out what we might do about this. But it's a good thing we haven't had any middle housing land divisions quite yet. We've had a lot of interest in them, but no one has proposed one as yet, but we expect one probably in the next few months, I think. But anyway, so those are the things that the planners are worrying about in the office right now. It's probably more of a situation, this is another one that we actually have this in town right now. It's a detached plex situation, but we could imagine future property lines and then folks coming in for any one of those individual lots wanting to do other things. So it's going to be a spreadsheet of some kind, I think, to try to track and figure out keep everybody in check on something like that. But
So if you all have any brilliant ideas between now and the next time we come and talk about this, just let us know.
Right.
So it's the state that dictates that it's by, okay.
Yeah. So there's a parent lot and then there are the sublots. And the communities have very little ability to regulate what happens on the sublots, but the parent lot is so we have perimeter setbacks, we have overall lot coverage, we have overall minimum landscaping, but we cannot regulate setback, lot coverage, those sorts of things on each of the individual sublots. So we sort of end up looking at the collective anyway. But yeah, so I think we think it's going to be tricky.
So what about trees? If we have a middle housing development and middle housing land division on with a site that has trees that are preserved. Mm-hmm. We lost your presentation.
Oh, sorry. Did you want it back? Sorry, I wanted to make it easier to look at.
Oh yeah, whatever you want to do is fine. So I'm just kind of curious if you've got obviously if you're on one of the smaller lots or whatever, you're on a lot with a tree that presumably has to be protected for the whole development.
Correct.
Then I guess you can't knock that, you can't take the tree out so you can put up a shed basically, even if you have yard, technically on the tax lot, map or whatever, behind your structure. If the tree's there, and you can't do anything with it. But beyond that, beyond some kind of protected resource or whatever, I wonder if you could have something like a maximum disturbance area standard. I think that the county has a maximum disturbance area for development on a lot with HCA. So if you have a site that is entirely covered in HCA, you're allowed a maximum disturbance area, even if you can't find enough lower or non-HCA site to put up a structure. You're allowed 5,000 square feet or whatever, and obviously that's a different circumstance, but I wonder if there's if we could have a kind of a similar standard where you could put up kind of a standard sized shed in the backyard, unless there's something like a tree in the way, mm-hmm. And we're not going to let you take out a tree, for that.
Right.
And then that way, even if you do have kind of a smaller slice of the pie, for your particular middle housing land division scenario, that you'd still have the ability to put up a shed, something, again, sounds like accessory structures are intended to be something, really incidental and customary to the residential use. And so, trampoline or a shed or a little deck or something, is probably okay. And even considering how, even considering the overall standard of, not, I'm losing my words right here, but, the standard that we're dealing with, that is coverage area. And so maybe in the net, you're allowed to go a little bit over the coverage area for the total development, because you're at least allowing everybody to do something,
yep.
With their space. And so maybe a maximum disturbance area allows mm-hmm. that kind of flexibility for individual homeowners without really sacrificing and turning it into madness for you guys. Right. And I don't know what that maximum disturbance area would look like on a larger lot, in that development either. But something like that, where you've got kind of a fallback standard that allows someone to do something pretty incidental with their backyard or whatever, I think would be a good standard to explore.
No, that's a good idea. We have a similar standard in our HCA. There's sort of an amount that you're allowed to disturb. It's a percentage. There's a whole mathematical way of getting there, but trying to apply something similar to that so that each sublot would still be able to do something.
I like that idea.
And not everything. But that lot one doesn't blow it for everybody else with their shed. So that's actually, that's a nice approach. So I will take a look at that. Thank you. It's a great idea. Any other questions about what we're doing here? Anything else?
To me, it seems like, and this is maybe an issue with the state, but it seems like you can't do an MULD without some sort of HOA. Was that the intent from the state, or is that just a sad byproduct of that? Or to me, it seems like a burden to potential property owners to have to be in an agreement like that, and makes the process that much more complicated. Again, is that something that is intended by the state, something that we can work around, or do we just have to live with it?
I think, and I don't want to pretend to be the state.
Right.
But I think the necessity for an HOA or for any kind of agreement amongst the property owners for maintenance of easements is if there are easements or something like that. So it's probably going to depend. That last example, it's conceivable that an HOA might not be necessary for those three, right? Because the 3 units are up front, you just draw a line straight back and nobody needs to touch anybody else. But the one that has, for a detached plex, for example, where the units are kind of all over the property, access is crossing over other people's properties. I mean, utilities you have to have direct utilities to each unit. You can't split or share anything like that, but you might have to cross a property to get there. So there are going to be easements. So I don't know that if it was the intent of the state to require HOAs, but I think it's going to depend on what the layout for the development is, that there might just inevitably have to be something just by virtue of where utilities are, where access is. There might be some common areas just because of the design of the development, but it's not necessary every time, but it might be, again, depending on the design of it. But I think, again, even if there is an HOA, it's still not the full kind of condominium sort of arrangement. And I think that was the intent, was that there was a fee simple opportunity for someone to own their middle housing unit and the land underneath it. Because without it, condominium was the only way to do it. Because we all have frontage requirements. Most communities have all kinds of requirements for all these sublots, and Senate Bill 458 did away with all of that.
Yeah.
So,
I guess my recommendation or suggestion is to, wherever we can, see ways to not necessitate the need for an HOA. If it can be covered simply by some sort of shared easement,
right.
Great. But
So how, I know we don't have a lot of experiences with this in this part of the country, but particularly in our city, how does this work with townhouses where you have attached, structures, but there are fee simple ownership, right?
Right.
And there's no HOA involved with that, as far as I understand. I mean, not in all cases.
Correct. And townhouses are by definition on their own lots. So that's
right.
That's how they exist. They are attached single homes, as opposed to single detached homes. So yeah, I think it's unlikely, or again, an HOA is probably not necessary for most townhouse developments because they all have frontage. They're already on the street, right? They might have a garage driveway or something. And it's kind of like that triplex drawing. I mean, that could very easily be townhouses also. And you just draw the lines back and you're done. And there might never be an HOA involved.
in that example, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah,
in that
please.
example,
No, you're fine.
wouldn't require that shared coverage,
So
or it would?
this
still?
one was not developed as a townhouse. So that existing triplex does not already have those property lines. So they would be coming in as a middle housing land division now. Had it come in originally as a townhouse development and was built, like that, then no,
Okay.
each lot is its own thing. It has its own lot coverage because townhouse lots have their own standards. That is not the same as a middle housing land division.
So to clarify, it's really just the timing of
The
Correct.
lots versus the structure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, I just want to agree with what Commissioner Carpenter was saying, that we definitely do not want to make it to where HOAs are a de facto standard or requirement, or even maybe, we want, I would like to make sure that we're offering true fee simple ownership options. And at the same time, and again, the Natural Resources Code might be the better venue for this. When we do have common areas, when we do, we need to kind of figure that out too. And I'm glad to see that, that's on your radar to kind of figure that out too, because that's been coming up more and more around the region, I guess, not just in, Clackamas County or Milwaukie or whatever, but particularly when you have an HOA that's supposed to be in charge of a natural resources tract 30 years after the approval. What's going on? Are they keeping up with it? Is the HOA still even active? Those kinds of things are continuing to pop up more and more and becoming a priority in different spaces that I'm involved in. And so, we want to, that may be evolving because it is becoming such a concern, but at the same time, I'm glad that it's on our radar and we need to be, kind of thinking about that in, wherever there's common ownership involved, making sure that the city is ultimately getting what it should be out of, a common stormwater tract, a commonly owned stormwater tract, or a commonly owned natural resources tract. There's policy reasons why we require that to be done that way. And so we want to make sure that, in a generation from now, when people, completely different people are living there and responsible for it, that we're continuing to get what our policy says we should be getting out of those common areas.
Agreed. Excellent point.
All right, Vera.
That's great. I appreciate the feedback. Thank you, everyone, very much. And if you keep reading it and you keep thinking of things, please let me know. You know where I am. Thanks again. Appreciate it.
Okay, I think we can move on to item number 8. Other business. Do commissioners have any other items for discussion?
No.
I actually have 2 items. I'll just throw those out there. So the Milwaukie Arts Committee will offer free umbrella decorating kits that include battery operated lights and other craft decor. You pick up a free kit while supplies last on this Sunday from noon to 2 at the Leading Library. And also the Milwaukie Arts Committee is planning a family-friendly New Year's Eve event that will include lowering of a large lighted bean cherry. And the event should be 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. So if you have any questions, you can take a look on the Milwaukie Arts Facebook page, or if you want to help volunteer for setup or takedown, you can email the Arts Committee at milwaukeearts@gmail.com. Okay, item number 9, forecast for future meetings.
Well, actually, we do not have any more meetings this year, you all. I thought I was going to come and talk to you all in December, but it turns out that we're going to push that out a little bit. So that's it for the year. I didn't realize we were having a wrap for 2023, but I guess that's where we are. It's been a good year, and thank you all so much for being here with us through all of this and being such a great body of folks to rely on to help us navigate all of these waters, key players in all of this. So thank you, and I guess with that, I'll see you next year.
Nice.
Jeffrey's like, great.
Okay, if there's nothing else, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Okay, Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Okay. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Night, thank you.